In this video, I'm going to go through the process of setting up a simple rig for our ghost character here. Not anything overly complex, but just enough to kind of get you familiar with doing rigging and understanding, what it is and the process of it. Before I get started, I do want to go over a little bit of terminology with you. The first important word to understand is the word root. When I talk about adding the root bone or just the root in general, what that means is that's kind of the master bone joint thing in our rig that all our other bones are connected to. So the root is kind of like the main one, and we usually want to put that in a nice central location. If we were doing a full humanoid creature that had, both arms and hips, usually the root is in the hip area, like between the legs, and all the other bone systems are hooked up to that. However, since our character today does not actually have legs, it just kind of has a worm-like body, we are going to be putting the root in the chest between the shoulders. So keep in mind, normally, if you are doing characters, you would probably actually want to put it in the hip area, but we're going to put ours up in the chest. Some other terminology I want you to be aware of is the idea of the two different types of rigging systems that we can set up. The kind of straightforward way that you just kind of naturally get by setting this up is called the forward kinematics system. Forward kinematics is, if we just kind of build bones, that's kind of how it's set up. This is a much more manual setup where we would then animate it by manually rotating our joints in our hierarchy. So we would first start with the shoulder and rotate it, then the elbow, and then the wrist to kind of get our hand into a proper position. It is a little bit more tedious, but this is a very exact way of if we need to, have our arms moving or positioned, mostly the movement in a very specific, like kind of arc-like way. So imagine a walk cycle where the arms are kind of swinging next to the body, and we want to kind of make sure that we have a very precise, arcing movement with that. A forward kinematic system would be the best way to set that up to animate those arm swings. The other type of system we can set up is called inverse kinematics. And rather than controlling all of the joints manually, we set up kind of like an IK chain. In fact, when we set it up, you'll see that there is like a line that kind of connects the beginning and end of our IK handle, where rather than, rotating the shoulder, rotating the elbow, rotating the wrist to get our hand to where we want it to go, we actually just move the handle, the IK handle at the wrist, and put our hand where it needs to go, and the program figures out the rotation of the shoulder, the elbow, etc. for us, like where it needs to rotate and where its position should be. This is great if we need a very precise placement of our hands, or sometimes you also do this for feet. So if we needed to use this hand to, grab something or point to something on a surface, we would want to use an inverse kinematic system so that we know exactly where our hand is going to be. And if it doesn't really matter what the rest of that arm is doing, as long as it's not, bending in strange ways, and we would have our constraints set up correctly so that we wouldn't be bending things oddly. But inverse kinematics, useful if the endpoint needs to be very precise in where it needs to end up. Forward kinematics is useful if the actual just general movement, and especially if you're moving in, animation arcs, is the important part, but we're not being super precise with where that ends up. So with that said, let's begin rigging our character. A couple things before we get started in the process. make sure that you are over in the rigging drop down in the upper left. We want to switch over to rigging so that we have, you know, some different controls here at the top. And while we can look at things in our perspective viewport, please make sure that you are working in your orthographics to actually place our bones. So we'll be switching between the orthographic, you know, front as well as the side. Do not try to set these up by going to your perspective and thinking that just pressing this is good enough, because this has some distortion to it because it is meant to be true to life. It's not orthographic. It does have some depth information there. So please make sure that you are working either in your front viewport or your side viewport to place your bones. The other important thing we need to do before we begin is we need to turn on this button right here. It's close to our X-ray. It's actually to the right. It's called X-ray joints, so that as we place our bones in our system, we'll be able to see them through the character. So we're not, you know, placing them and we can't see where they're at. All right, so let's create our first bone. We're going to create that root, which is just going to be a singular bone right in the chest. So I'm going to go up to skeleton, and I do want to go into this create joints first, like the actual settings of it. By default, it is kind of a, they kind of make these kind of small. And remember, this character is, I think we modeled it, it's kind of close to 2 meters big. So if we have a bone radius of 10 centimeters or 2 centimeters, it might be a little on the small side. Yours might even be smaller than that. So I'm probably going to bump this up to like a 20. Well, just let me bump it up to 10. Nope, it's going to make me stay stuck at 2, and that's fine. But we can always adjust how it looks through this system. So I'm just going to place my first bone, and I can adjust this afterwards. So yeah, I don't have to be super picky, but I do kind of want it in the middle of the chest between the shoulders, but below the neck. So maybe like right about here. I'm just going to click once because we only need this as our root. So once we get it placed, I do want to make sure I name this one root underscore GNT for joint. And I can place it a little bit nicer if I need to. So for instance, if I go to the modeling toolkit, I want to make sure it's right in the center. I'm going to switch to my side view, and I'm going to kind of move this more, because I know I'm going to be building like, you know, a head bone off of this and, you know, those shoulders. So I kind of want to make sure it's like right in the middle too of that way. Oops, let me go back to the front view. So that is going to be our root. It's a little on the small side. It can be a little hard to see. If you do want to fix that, we can go over to the attribute editor, and this underneath this joint, this radius, we can bump this one up to like a 10 maybe, just so it's a little easier to see. Honestly, it doesn't matter in the long run, because we're never going to really be manipulating this directly. It's just kind of there. So one of the things I want to make sure you are aware of is the fact that as we are setting up our joints and bones, when it comes to animation, we would never want to directly animate our, you know, we don't want to grab these joints and directly manipulate them. Instead, we need to make helper objects that our animators would animate with instead. And it's kind of a good habit to get into is to make sure that you are creating these as you go, so that you're not making a whole bunch of them at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and make my first one, which is I'm just going to go underneath curves, and I'm going to make a circle. It's called NURBS Circle 1. I want to rename this so it's easier for me to know that it is going to correlate with that root. So I'm going to rename it to root underscore KTRL for control. So this is going to be my root control. It is pretty small. I'm going to scale it up so we can see it. And the nice thing about this is that we can kind of make this look however we want to help us with knowing that this is, you know, the root control. Because when we're animating, we're going to want to be able to click on it. You know, we're going to want to be able to click on it to select it in order to do our stuff. Like we want to be able to really be able to see that. Before we do that though, let's make sure that it is the pivot is the same pivot as that root bone or root joint. So I'm going to, you know, select it at the object level with my move tool. I'm going to hold down the V key, and this and as I click and drag this, this is like a vertex snap, and it will snap perfectly to the center of that joint. So now we have our circle. And as long as, you know, we don't move that pivot point, we can manipulate this however we want. So I might make this like a little bit wider, like more of like an oval, just so that it's a little bit easier to see. The big things though, the big thing we do need to do after we're done kind of manipulating those is we do need to make sure that we delete its history and freeze its transform before we do the next step. We always want to clear it out because we don't want it to affect, we want this to be perfectly clean. We don't want this to affect any kind of transform changes, because I did use that scale tool to change the sides. We don't want it to affect the roots. Once you're satisfied with the shape of your control, once we've deleted its history and cleared its transform, we can now connect it up to the corresponding joint. The order of operations is very important with this, so you need to make sure you do this in the correct order. So I'm first going to select my control in the hierarchy. I'm going to hold down the control key and then select the joint I want it to be associated with. I'm then going to come underneath constrain and choose parent. We know this worked because now that root joint has this little extra thing down here, the little chain icon that says that it has a parent constraint on it. So now if we select that root control and we move just that root control selected and we move it, we can see that it is actually also moving that root joint. Right, so we have one down. Let's do the rest. We can first work maybe on the body. We'll get like a nice body kind of going. And then we'll do the arms, and then we'll work on the head. So I'm going to switch back to my front, and I'm going to go ahead and, I'm going to actually build a new chain. I'm not going to work off this root joint to begin with. I want to be able to just kind of start fresh. So I'm going to go back and do create joints, and I'm going to start placing them. So actually, you know what? I changed my mind. Let me go to the side view to do this one, since he's kind of curved a bit. I'd rather kind of make it follow this one. So let's actually go to side view. So let's do that again. Let's do create joints. I'm going to create one. We don't need too many in the chest. We do have our spine, so you might want to do some. So I'm going to click, kind of in where the spine would be, because it's important that we put our bones where the bones actually belong. So I'm going to have like just maybe two up there, one at the hip, one kind of in the middle here, and then maybe one at the end. And that should be pretty good. So let's go to our front view, and it did build it down the center, so we should be pretty good with that. If you're looking at this and it kind of bothers you, like the size and the shape of things, we can manipulate these after the fact if we go over to the attribute editor. We can, you know, individually select one of these joints. Like for instance, let's go back to that last joint. If that's way too big, remember we can come down to this radius and we can drop this down and make it a little bit smaller. We can also, let's see. Yeah, we can drop those down a little bit smaller. I'll probably make this one smaller too. It's a little bit too big. Let's go up to joint this one. This one's really beefy. And I'll kind of, maybe I'll just, those look fine. These look fine as is. And if we do need to make some adjustments, we can. So like I might move, I'm just gonna get my move tool. Maybe move this one a little bit. Let's move these a little. It does, you know, since it is, you know, a chain, it does move all the other ones too. So we'll have to make some little adjustments. That's fine. Maybe somewhere like there. And the last is kind of up like that. Okay. Let's go ahead and rename these. I'm going to call this one body top underscore JNT. Body chest, maybe JNT. This one is body hips, even though technically it doesn't have legs, it's still kind of like the hip area. Or JNT. We'll do body, that'd be kind of like the thigh. JNT. We'll call this one body knees. And this one would be body feet. Or body tail. Let's just do body tail for the end of the tail. So that we know how this is all set up. Okay. Let's go ahead and we do want to, you know, we did some changing and moving of things. One of the important things is to make sure that our joints are oriented correctly. We do need our joint pivots to be pointing to the bone that it's attached to. And you can see that we might have kind of got these a little bit askew. So we can select this and then we can go underneath skeleton and we can choose orient joints. And so watch all those pivot points. You can see that it tweaked them a little bit so that they are kind of pointed in the right direction. We do also need to hook up our body system into our main root. To do this, and this again, this isn't, you have to make sure you do this in the correct order. You need to select your new joint. I don't want to call it the root, but like the base of your new bone system. You then need to control click on our root. So they're both selected, and then hit P on the keyboard. What this did was it created a bone that connects them. And it also, if you notice, moved it. So now this is parented underneath that root. So if we close up root, we can see that it's in there. We know that this works successfully too is if we grab that root control and we start moving it around, we can see that it is hooked up to that. All right, so right now this is kind of an FK setup where, you know, we might want some of that, where we would want to maybe control, you you know, this kind of wiggling around a little bit. But we could kind of also practice doing an IK setup on this just for the sake of speed, for when it comes to animating, since it just needs to kind of maybe like swish back and forth or move like up and down. Like it's not going to be overly complex. So let's set up an IK and on this, and so that we can just grab this tail and kind of move it where we want it to go. To set up an IK, we first need to figure out which things need to get hooked up. I'm probably going to hook it up from here to kind of do like that side to side movement. We don't need the whole body kind of moving with that. Actually, you know what? It should probably be, yeah, hips to tail. So where its hips are, let's move that a little lower. To tail. Let me make a quick adjustment. And let me just double check that this was oriented. There we go. But not the whole system. So let's go to skeleton, and we need to go to create IK handle. And I'm going to first go into the settings because we do want to make sure that sticky is turned on. And once we're good with that, we need to click on the base joint. So that would be, we would do the hips. And then I would click on the tail joint where it ends. And we know that we did set up something because it does turn kind of this dark red color. Now, if we grab that IK handle, we can move this around. And it kind of like, you know, solves the whole thing. It's a little bit stiff on the middle. But for what we're doing, I'm not too concerned with making it less stiff, since this is kind of like our first go at rigging stuff. We're just going to be kind of satisfied with that. So let's build a control for our IK handle, because again, we don't want to grab the handle and move it around. We want to just be able to grab the handle and kind of, you know, manipulate it back and forth. So let's create our circle and let's scale it up. I'm going to move it closer, and I'm going to snap it to that center vertex, the center of that. One thing that might be helpful is after you get this snapped, we don't necessarily need to keep this directly, you know, inside of here. Like it doesn't need to actually, encircle this, as long as the pivot is there. So what I can actually do is I'm going to go into the vertex edit mode of our circle, not the object mode, because we don't want to move the object. We just want to move the vertices. And I'm going to move these outside. Actually, let me make sure I select all of them and move these. I'm not getting all of them. Where are they? There we go. Oh, I have camera-based selection on. Let's turn that off. I'm going to move these outside. Let's try one more time. There we go. And I can rotate this too. Let's go to the top view. So that it'll be a little bit easier to find. And I know that that's like my tail manipulation. See how the pivot's still in there though? That's what we want. Okay, let's delete its history, freeze its transform, and let's connect it up. I'm going to call this one tail underscore control. I'm going to hold control. I'm going to make sure that's selected on object mode. Select hold control and then select that IK handle, then go to constrain parent. So now I have tail control and root control. So I can just grab, select that tail control, and we can move our tail around. Why don't we test and see how our rig is going? Normally you can't, you're not supposed to attach the model to it until you're fully done. Um, but we can, take a little look and see how it's going and make sure that the body's kind of hooked up kind of nice and, good enough for our level. Keep in mind, it's going to do some weird things to your arms if you do test it at this point. But that's okay. We'll fix that problem once we do the arms. So how do we do this? How do we attach what we have currently to the skin and see how it's going? The way that we do this is we need to first make sure we're in object selection mode. We're going to go to select all by type and select all of our joints. I do recommend that you do it this way because we only want to select the joints. We don't want to select anything else. We're then going to shift click to select our mesh that we want to skin on it. We'll then go to skin and choose bind skin. Now if we grab our different controls, so like our tail control, like I said, ignore the hands for now, but we can see that it is changing. So we could easily animate like a little, woo, it's going back and forth and he's flying around. So that's working pretty well. And we can also test our root control, that it is moving the body, but since we do have that IK set up and this is, not actually parented to this, we do and want that we do expect that to stay in place. So it looks like it's doing a pretty good job. So I'm going to quickly undo this. We don't actually want to have it parented yet. We need to undo all of that. If you made a mistake, you can always also go back and reselect your stuff. Like you could select, we have this unbind skin that we can also do to deselect. But it's better just to undo it, just to make sure that we did get rid of all of that. All right, let's now work on those arms. So same kind of process as before. I'm going to first go to the arms. I am going to do my front viewport because I'll be able to see it a little bit better. I'm going to go underneath skeleton. I'm going to create joints and I'm going to first create my shoulder joint. I'm then going to create my elbow. Actually, you know what? Those are a little bit too big. Let's go and change those settings. I think I need to drop those down. Let's drop these down back to like a 10 and see how that goes. So shoulder, elbow, wrist, and if you want to put like one out at the hand, we can end the hand out here. We don't need to worry about the fingers, but you might just want something for that hand. Once we have that, let's switch to our side view. If it's getting a little bit too much, we can temporarily hide our root so we just see this new system that we now need to position a little bit better. So there's our shoulder, and let's go ahead and rename these as we place them. So this is going to be, we're working on our left shoulder. So I'm going to start with L underscore for left shoulder joint. Then this is going to be our elbow, and we do want to place it where the actual bending would be. So think about where the bend happens in your arm, in your elbow joint. We can then name that L underscore elbow joint. We'll then grab that wrist and make sure we put it where the wrist actually flexes. L underscore wrist joint. And let's make sure the hand one is just kind of somewhere in the hand. We're not really going to do too much with that, but we should name it L underscore hand. We, once we have it positioned the way we want it, it looks good to us. Let's make sure we do go underneath skeleton and orient our joints so that they are pointing correctly. And now what we need to do is get it over onto the other side. Hopefully, if you modeled your character correctly, you did set it up so that your arms are symmetrical, so that we can take advantage of that with also rigging it. We don't really want to build another arm. Instead, we can just duplicate this. We don't want to duplicate this in the usual way. We can't just hit like Control D or do a copy paste. Instead, with this selected, we can go underneath skeleton and choose mirror joints. So let's go to the settings for that, because it does have this really handy feature right here that if we did name these correctly, where we started off naming them L underscore, we can tell it, hey, anywhere in the name for L underscore, when you mirror it, change it to R underscore. So it will automatically rename this for us in the correct way. Make sure that you do mirror it across the correct axis. I believe mine is going to be the YZ axis. So I'm going to hit apply. And we can see that I now have my whole right shoulder. And since it's done symmetrically, we did this right at the origin, it is set up in the correct position. I'm a bit paranoid, so I'm going to make sure that I orient those joints as well. And now we just need to hook these up to our root. Same process as before. Order of operations, super important. I'm going to first select my left shoulder joint. I'm going to hold Control. Oops, let me unhide that one. Left shoulder joint selected. Control, select that root joint, and then hit P. P as in person. Actually, I think it just means parent on the keyboard. It'll create that new bone for us between the two, and it is now childed underneath that root. Let's do the right shoulder. So I'm going to select that first joint, hold Control, select root, and then hit P. And now we have it fully parented. We can double check that this did work by grabbing that root control and moving it around, and we see that the arms are moving with it now. I am going to set up an IK control for our arms as well, so that we can just have them kind of, we just need them kind of like wobbling back and forth, like as like an idle animation when we do get to animate this. Just for the sake of time, it is going to be a little bit quicker to do that. So, and it's good practice too. Let's practice setting up our IK. So let's go to skeleton, create IK handle, and I'm going to click first on my left shoulder joint. And I'm not going to put the final one though on the hand. Instead, I actually want to put it on the wrist. That makes the most sense. And we see that it did turn red, so we do have our IK set up. We can test it. Let's grab the IK handle and we can start to bend it, and we can see it is moving, correctly. Let's undo that movement and let's do our left one. I'm sorry, our right one. So let me go back to skeleton. Create IK handle. I'm going to click on the shoulder and then click on the wrist bone to create that other IK handle. And I always like to double check that it did work correctly. Yes, there we go. Undo those movements. Oops, one too far. There we go. We do need to set up our IK controllers. So let me create a circle. Snap that in. Scale it up so we can see it. And you know what? I'm going to rotate it right on the axis. I'm going to kind of keep it here. But I want it to be kind of positioned closer so it looks like it's actually kind of around that wrist. It'll look a little bit nicer. And let's change the shape of this just a little. Let's move these in. Just for fun, you know, just to kind of show that we can do whatever we want with this. We can pull that one out and push this one in. We can manipulate our shape however it helps us. Let me make sure I delete its history, freeze this transform. And this is going to be called, let's see, right hand control. I also want it over here, and to save time, I don't really want to like have to worry about remaking this, you know, exactly the same, because we should make it look pretty similar. So instead, what I'm going to do, I'm going to duplicate this one. I know, you know, since we built it at the origin, I know if I just change its X from this negative 663.43 to a positive, it will go to the other side, but, you know, it's still tilted. It's still not, you know, exactly a good mirror. If I switch over to our scale and scale it in the negative one on the X, it will look like it kind of flipped around and now looks the same on both sides. I do have to remember to rename this. It's not right hand control. This is left hand. Let's take that one off. Before we hook it up, we do need to remember to let's just double check the history is deleted and the transforms are frozen. So let's select first that right hand control, and then going to control click on the correct IK. Did I do the right one? Nope, it's this one. So right hand control, this IK handle 3 is the correct one for me. And let's parent that. Let's do the left hand control, the other IK handle. Parent that. So let me move these down a little bit, just so they're a little bit easier to find. And if we do this, we can see that it is hooked up, and the left hand is also hooked up, right? Okay. Let's keep moving along with this now, and we are getting, you know, close to finishing our rig. All we really need to finish setting up is going to be our head, so that we can like maybe turn it from side to side or up and down. We're going to want that kind of motion. This specific one, though, we're not going to do an IK rig. It's going to be an FK setup so that we can, you know, specifically control that head rotation. So let's go to our, actually, let's do this on the side view, so that we can kind of, you know, set it up correctly. And we're not going to need too many bones. We have our neck, and then we have the rest of the head. So I'll probably just do a few bones in the neck and then just have our head bones. So let's go to skeleton, create joints. We're going to start here. Maybe click the middle of the neck, and then the top of the neck, and then finish off with our head bone, just kind of going through. There we go. Let's make sure the front view looks good, and that should be fine. We're going to go through and name them. So let's see. This is our neck base joint, neck middle joint, and this will be our neck top joint, and then this is just our head. Let's make sure that we are oriented correctly. So we're going to go to skeleton and orient our joints. And the last thing would be to then just make some controls for this. And we're probably going to have a little bit more, just so that we can, you know, have that kind of control of like rotation and stuff like that. So let's go and make a circle. Let me scale it up. It's really hard to see right now. At least, there we go. Let's just turn X-ray view on. There we go. That's better. Let's get it at that. Honestly, I probably don't need it at the base. Let's do it in the middle. And I'm going to move these out. Just so it's a little easier to see. So this will be neck control. And we are going to, oh, it's a little wompy, that's fine. Delete its history, fuse its transform. Let's then select that mid joint. And let's parent it. Constrain parent. So now, if I grab this, and I rotate it, we can see that it's going to help us look kind of side to side. Let's do another one for that neck top. And this will kind of give us a little bit more fine control over the neck as well. We'll actually probably just call this one head control. Let's actually just duplicate this. Call it head control. Move it. Make sure it's snapped to this one. Is that right? Love that. Got it. That's probably fun. And we can change its shape. As long as it's something obvious. We can make this. I'm just kind of doing this real quick. It's not that great of a shape, just for the sake of time. We'll pretend that this is fine. There we go. That's our head control. Let's delete its history, freeze its transform, and let's hook it up. That's actually going to be neck top is what it's going to connect to. Constrain parent. So now if we rotate that one, so we'll be able to, you know, rotate it a little bit and then rotate this one even more to kind of give it like a bit of a turn. But this one too, we'll be able to kind of tilt a little sideways. So we'll have a little bit more control over this neck and the head with those two. All right, let's make sure that we hook this neck base up into that root. So I'm going to select that neck base joint, hold control and select that root joint and then hit P. And it should have parented it. Yep, there we go. So now this whole system is all hooked up. Oh, wait a second. What's going on here? It's parented. We select that. Let's see, hold on. There's that. So neck base. Root. P. Did that work? I think it did. Let's try this. Oh, I didn't work the first time. Oh, I know. This is a good learning moment. So, do you see how even though this is now in here, if I grab that root joint, it is not going, that head's not going with it. That is because if you need it to also travel with it, we have to make sure that we parent our controls correctly. So, you know, for the hands, we might want to keep the hands and the tail kind of where it is, you know, if we want to keep those stationary, that's fine. This head though, we're going to have to make sure that we make this a child of that root. So I'm going to grab this head, parent it to the root. And now if we have that root, we can see that it goes with us. It is possible you might also want to parent these controls in there as well. You can kind of play with it and see, you know, what feels good to you. Because if we do that, now if we grab that root, that whole thing comes, oops, I forgot the tail. Let's get that tail in there too. There we go. The whole thing goes with us. All right, so our system should be done, our rig, that we can finally skin it. So let's go ahead and set up that skin. So hold on, there we go. First, select all by type, joints. We're then going to hold shift and select our skin, and then go up to skin and choose bind skin. And now if we move our root, we can see it goes with us. But let's move that, let's move our, we can do our head first. We start rotating our head. See it moving. It's a little bit weird how it does the mouth, but you know, it's kind of weird, huh? What about if we do the hand control? What happens with this one if we move that? Oh no, we're getting a little, you know, kind of funny, but generally when we move our hands, it doesn't make the rest of our body move. So what is going on? Usually when you get your bones set up, and especially for something this tight, it gets pretty close, but ultimately we're going to have to do something called weight painting. And what that means is we're going to tell our mesh how much do our different bones affect you. And this is one of the reasons why it's super important that we name our bones and our joints and all that stuff so that we can make our weight painting go a little bit quicker. This is one of the last things we have to do. That's why we haven't really talked about it yet, because we can't actually paint weights on our skin until it's actually skinned, and we haven't had that up to this point. So select your model at object level, and what we're going to do is we're going to right click, and we now have this option we haven't had before called Paint Skin Weights Tool. So we're going to turn that on, and we get this whole new dialog box. That's super important. And oops, let's not do it like that. Let's pull it out. I always do that. What this is it, oh my God, trying to find a good place. There we go. It tells us how all the different bones affect our model. So for instance, if we go to the left shoulder joint, anywhere that it's white affects the model. Anywhere that it's black does not affect the model. So if we don't want that shoulder joint to be affecting the body, we're going to have to come in and paint weights on it, you know, fix the weight painting. You know, we get kind of like a little paintbrush. We do need to make sure that we are painting the right color. Let's do brush. It's going to take me a second to orient myself with this. Where is that color? So what we want to make sure is that we are setting this to replace, because we don't want to just like add to it. We don't want to like do anything weird with it. We want to make sure that we're just painting white or black. We can change the with this value here where 1 is white, 0 is black. We can change the size of our brush to, let's see, well, let us, I honestly just pick this bigger one and kind of paint this out. This is not what I meant to do. And let's see, is there a brush size? Brush mode, paint, select. To find the brush size, you have to scroll down a little bit. It's kind of hidden. It's underneath this stroke. That's really small. So if we start bumping this up, we can see we get a much bigger brush. We can easily come in here and fix this. So we don't want that shoulder. We might want it to affect, you know, a little bit of the chest, because if you think about, if you raise your arm, it does kind of pull the skin a little bit, but we definitely don't want it affecting, you know, all of that. And it is based off of, notice it is based off of your poly count, like your polygons. So we, you know, we're kind of basically painting the vertices with this. There we go. We can then move down to the next. So elbow, we definitely don't want that to affect here. And we don't really need it to affect the hand either. That's kind of weird. Let's take that off. And let's go to wrist. Take the wrist off the body. And let's actually fix the fingers, because we do need it to affect, you know, we don't want the fingers to stay in place when we're doing that. So let's paint those fingers back on. And the hand, oof, we don't want that. Oops, let's fix that value. There we go. Let's do our right shoulder. Same process. Let's paint out most of this body. Especially the face. And this can be kind of fun. Like, it can be kind of fun to come in here and set the weights. So shoulder, elbow. Take it off the hand. Wrist. And let's make sure the wrist is affecting the hand well. There we go. And let's take the hand influence off the body. All right, there we go. We can always test, we can always just close this, you know, hit Q on the keyboard to get out of that and go in and test things again. So if we grab like that right hand control, oh, we missed a little piece. That's why it's always good to test. That's kind of gross there. We'd probably want to fix that. Same thing, left hand. Oh, we missed some. We probably want to basically take it off the underarm. That's not looking nice. So let's select our mesh again. Right click, paint skin weight tool. And where was that? Who? Right hand joint looks fine. We missed it somewhere. Oh, right there. And let's take the underarm just completely off. That looked kind of weird. I gotta fix that. I don't want to... Nope. Let's fix this side now. Let's see. Left hand looks fine. Oop, there's the wrist. Elbow. Oh, elbow too. I was really sloppy, wasn't I? Let's go to shoulder and take the underarm off. The armpit does not look good. You can do in-betweens too. Like if you know you kind of want it to half and half, we could put, you know, a little bit of a... Actually, I think it's opacity. So we take the opacity down. We can paint like less. You see it's like a really light gray that we're painting on there. Let's take you off. There we go. And let's test again. Let's close this tool. Grab our right hand. I think I still have a little bit of influence somewhere. Left hand. Yeah, I still gotta clean this up. I don't want to spend too much of the video going in and cleaning up, but you can see I still have like, it's probably like a really light, what did I miss? Oh, there it is. It's ever so slight. So I gotta be careful. Oh no, I didn't. I moved it by accident. Gotta be more careful. Okay. Let's say those are good for now. I want to move on. We can go now to like the body, and we can make sure that it's not influencing the arms. It's kind of weird that it's not there though. Let's take the... Oops. Wrong way. Chest. Hips. That's pretty good. I'll actually take it down on up here. We don't need it to control this so much. Like if you notice some weirdness. There we go. Knees. Yeah, it doesn't need so much influence up here, I don't think. And the tail should be good. The big one was going to be that neck. So we got neck, base, neck, middle, and neck, top, and then the head. You kind of will want to determine, you know, the head shouldn't be super malleable. So we probably want to make sure that we are, you know, making sure that our head doesn't buck around, like wibble around like it was doing. So I'm going to see if this is the right order. And, you know, try things out too. What if we weighted it to the head bone, but what if we changed it and weighted it to a different bone? Like, how does that affect how it looks? Like, what do you think, you know, would work the best for your situation? Let's get this. I'll paint it up. I do probably want to take it off that neck, and let's make this brush. The brush is a little bit big for what we're doing right now. Let's take it down a little. Just take it off those. Let's do some more tests. Let's do our head control. And let's see if this works a little bit better. There we go. No more stretching on that head. The neck's a little bit weird. We'll have to paint those. But we are in some pretty good shape now. We fixed the major issues. Neck control. It's on the eyes a little bit. We'd have to take that off. But I think this video has been long enough. It's just about an hour. You should spend a lot more time getting the finer tweaks on that neck painting. But ultimately, we're in a good spot now. It is a very simple rig. But this will be enough, you know, as a beginning rig. Haven't rigged anything before. This will be really fun to kind of animate. Play with some of the weights with like that tail stuff. Side to side. We should actually just rotate that one. I'm just kind of moving this one around, but this looks better. Ooh, I'm getting it a little bit on the face. That's okay. Got that arm going, and we are good to go. All right, I will finish this up. Again, make sure you are familiar with the terminology covered, like the different types of kinematics, what root is, what weight painting is. Weight painting just means changing the influence of bones on the skin. And I will see you in another video.